And I hope that the audio is better on this video than the last attempt I made. And I went ahead and took that video down or made it private just because the audio was not so good. So what I want to talk about here is what we call the 12 levels of martial arts, and think of that more as the way the human mind works, or or the way we teach and learn. Probably the latter is because of the first part. So what are we doing when we teach a martial art? Typically, people will say, well, it's defensive in nature, so we start with defenses. Good thought. However, you can't really teach a defense, a block or a parry or sidestep, whatever you want to call that defensive motion. You can't teach a defense if you don't have an offensive motion. In other words, in order to teach defense, you have to have attack. And this is something that in the 12 levels, as I lay it out, we go into that in depth. So if you have 12 levels, then level 1 has to be attack, and level 1 also has to be defense. Now, which one you put in front of the other doesn't matter. It can't happen. They can't exist exclusively. So level 1 being attack. Now we have to say, well, how do we attack? What is the most effective means that we can come up with to attack somebody? Well, that's really involves context. So then you go and look at a system. Let's just use Filipino martial arts because it has a structure that's very orientated towards this aspect. You have a numbering system. Let's just say there are 12 strikes. Each strike is based on a particular, what they call, angle. So angle 1 being a diagonal across the body, angle 2 being a diagonal across the body, angle 3 being horizontal, 4, 5, and so on. You'll learn those attacks, and then subsequently, you will learn how to defend those attacks. Now, it could be true that someone who's teaching you, they'll just attack you, and they'll tell you block it like this, and they'll show you that way. They'll teach you the blocks first while they're doing the strikes, and they don't necessarily instruct you in how to strike properly. As you learn a structure like that, you're learning how to defend the attacks that are brought against you with that individual instructor, and or let's just say system-wide, all of the instructors, all of the people that do whatever Eskrima system attack in the same way. 1 through 12 is the same all the time. So you're going to learn how to defend those 12 attacks. Good. Now, here's the problem, and it doesn't matter what system you're talking about. You're only learning to defend the attacks that your structure or your curriculum uses. And you can say, well, these 12 strikes are universal, and they will, at some point, any attack will coincide with one of those strikes. No, because its context is not there. So let's just say you learn 12 strikes and 12 defenses. Now you have a structure, and you know how to attack and how to defend in 12 ways. Good. Now, you have to take a look at, let's just say, if you're an escrimador and you've done the 12 strikes, Well, how do you use your 12 defenses against a boxer who doesn't have 12 strikes in the way that you have learned them and the way you defend them? How do you go about doing that? Different story there, isn't it? You could say, well, I could treat the jab like a one and the cross like a two. Of course you could. Fine, but it's not the same thing. Now, let's move to a different thing. Let's say now you trained in eskrima and you're getting attacked by a person of a criminal background, and they don't even know a jab or a cross or a hook. They don't know an angle one, two, three, four, five, or six. They don't know any of that. And how do they attack you? What's their number one and their number two and their number three? Could all be the same strike, and it could be different. It could be based on what their intent is. So we say in the levels, what we just say is how to attack. How do they attack you? So you're going to have to go and do some research on other systems, find out how they attack, and see what either within your system or you find outside deals the best with those strikes. That's going to take a lot of research. Trust me, I've done it. And you have to turn around and do the same thing with strikes. You have to say, okay, now how do I strike? How do they strike? How do I attack? How do they defend? So someone told me once, well, many times, well, trapping doesn't work because nobody does this or this or this. Okay, so now I'm going to strike in a way where it either hits you or you have to block it. So there's the condition set for me to use trapping. Trapping is a byproduct of striking, and therefore it will work when the conditions are met. That's good. That's good, Michael. So you're exactly on point there. So now, as we go through our martial arts journey, and we start to study these different things, you're going to learn a lot about body language and human tendencies. That's going to help you a lot as you get further down. So we moved from level one, striking and defending, to level two, what we call riposte. This is where most martial arts meet their end. And what I mean by that is that's as deep as they go in the 12 levels. For the most part, the rest of them, they're seen as either instinctual or not necessary because it's bad form to strike somebody first. These are the comments I get often when I talk about this. So level two is a riposte, which is an attack after a defensive motion, which means your opponent has attacked you, you have defended that attack, and then you recover and attack them back or counter. That's level two. And so most systems are based on that structure. They strike, you block, and counter. They hit with a weapon, you deflect it and counter. Um, that's very, very common. If you look at Valentawak or well, any Eskrima, Kali, Arnis, Wing Chun, uh, karate, taekwondo, all of them are based on this. Boxing has a lot more counter punching in the initial phases than a lot of these other martial arts do. Um, so riposte is an attack after a defensive motion. That's level 2, cut and dried. Level 3 is a counterattack, which means essentially if someone attacks you in the same beat of time, you hit them or you destroy their attack with the strike. In Filipino martial arts, that would be known as a gunti or a scissors motion. JKD would call it a cover and hit or a parry and hit. Parry and hit together or block and strike simultaneously is a counterattack. Or sidestepping and striking like in boxing. If I slip and punch, counter punch, that's a counterattack, as opposed to parry and punch, which is a riposte. So if you're studying Wing Chun or JKD, even Filipino martial arts, there's a lot of counterattacks in that. And that's the simple structure. When the opponent attacks, you attack them back using one of your or their attacks. Now we get to level 4. Level 4 is a doozy for most people, and that's going to cause them to shut me off. Level 4 means that you are going to hit them first. And what we say is you strike on the intent. So when the opponent signals intent, that will be when you strike them. So that's level 4, preempting the strike. And so what we would say is if your opponent draws back to punch, hit them first. Because they've already clenched their fist, they've reared back, they've signaled intent. That's the clearest way to describe it. Or if they draw their weapon up on high, ready to strike, if you hit them first, that would be a preemptive strike. Or as we say, you're striking on the opponent's intent. And that's a crucial designation, and you want to keep that in your terminology. You strike on when the opponent signals intent. Level 5 is now you're getting into the area like the 5 ways of attack of Bruce Lee, what we call drawing. Drawing is creating an apparent opening for the opponent to strike into that you're fully prepared to counter, whether that's a riposte or a counterattack. You're opening that up with understanding that the opponent will attack there so that you can easily counter that. That's called drawing. Baiting is a cousin of drawing. However, in this case, what you are doing is typically, we differentiate this by baiting is maybe I'm leaning my head forward to try to get the opponent to strike. Or in the case of if I have a blade and I have it out, I'll stick it out there, try to get the opponent to strike it. That would be baiting versus drawing. And they're in the same family, and you could argue it's the same thing, but it's not quite the same thing when you break it down and you actually teach it and do it. And one of the reasons I'm doing this video is because a lot of people don't teach this. People do it instinctively, but people are not teaching this information. So that's level 5 and level 6.